The rain came down in sheets, turning New York City into a maze of blurred lights and slick pavement. Elliot Harper stood under the flickering neon sign of the 23rd Street station, their breath visible in the late November chill, cursing the MTA app that had lied about the last train. At 29, non-binary, and freshly unemployed, Elliot felt the universe was piling on, each raindrop a reminder of their unraveling life. They'd spent the evening at a dive bar in Chelsea, nursing a cheap beer and dodging questions from friends about the next step after getting laid off from their graphic design job. The truth was, Elliot had no plan, just a portfolio of half-finished sketches and a nagging sense that they were running out of time to figure it all out. When the bartender called last orders, they'd lingered too long, missing the 1:47 a.m. train by minutes. Now, stranded, with their phone at 3% battery and their wallet holding exactly $7.23, Elliot's options were grim. A $40 cab ride they couldn't afford or a long, wet walk to their Bushwick apartment. That's when they saw him. Across the platform, under the station's dim lights, stood a man in a navy jacket, his broad shoulders hunched against the cold. He was maybe early 30s, with dark hair curling slightly at the edges and a face that looked tired but kind. He caught Elliot's eye, offering a half-smile that felt like a lifeline in the empty station. "Missed it too, huh?" he called out, his voice carrying a faint Brooklyn accent. Elliot nodded, shoving their hands deeper into their denim jacket. "Yeah, app said it was delayed, but apparently it lied." The man chuckled, crossing the platform with an easy stride. "Noah Callahan," he said, extending a hand. "I'd say the MTA owes us both an apology." His grip was firm, his palm warm despite the chill. Up close, Elliot noticed the faint scar above his eyebrow and the way his brown eyes seemed to see right through their guarded exterior. "Elliot Harper," they replied, their voice softer than intended. "And yeah, I'm about ready to write a strongly worded letter." Noah grinned, pulling out his phone. "Battery's dead, or I'd check for the next bus." "You got a plan, Elliot?" They shrugged, trying to play it cool despite the knot in their stomach. "Walk, I guess, or sleep here and become a subway cryptid." Noah laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that made Elliot's chest feel lighter. "Tell you what," he said, glancing at the rain hammering the street above. "My place is a few blocks away. I've got a couch, a spare shirt to get you out of that soaked jacket, and coffee that's better than the sludge they sell at the bodega. You're welcome to crash." Elliot hesitated. They'd grown up in a small Ohio town where trusting strangers wasn't a thing, and New York hadn't exactly softened that instinct. But something about Noah, maybe the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the fact that he hadn't pushed when Elliot paused, felt safe. Or at least safe enough for a night when they had no better options. "Okay," Elliot said finally, their voice barely audible over the rain. "But only if you promise not to be a serial killer." Noah raised his hands, mock serious. "Scout's honor. I'm just an off-duty cop who missed the train like you." An off-duty cop. That explained the steady way he carried himself, like he'd seen worse nights than this and come out fine. Elliot followed him up the station stairs, the rain soaking their sneakers as they jogged the 3 blocks to Noah's apartment in Hell's Kitchen. The building was old but clean, with a creaky elevator that smelled faintly of pizza. Noah's place on the 5th floor was small, cluttered with books and vinyl records, a worn leather couch taking up most of the living room. A single lamp cast a warm glow, making the space feel like a refuge from the storm outside. "Here," Noah said, tossing Elliot a gray flannel shirt from a laundry basket. "It's clean. Bathroom's down the hall if you want to change." Elliot caught the shirt, the fabric soft and faintly scented with cedar. They slipped into the bathroom, peeling off their wet jacket and pulling on Noah's shirt. It was too big, the sleeves falling past their knuckles, but it felt like a hug they hadn't realized they needed. When they stepped back into the living room, Noah was setting out 2 mugs of coffee on a scuffed wooden table. "You look like you're drowning in that," Noah teased, but his eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary, a flicker of something warm passing through them. Elliot sat on the couch, wrapping their hands around the mug. "Thanks for this," they said, their voice quieter now. "I mean it. I was kinda screwed out there." Noah sat beside them, close enough that their knees almost touched. "No big deal. I've been stranded before. Figured I'd pay it forward." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easier than Elliot expected. Noah told stories about his beat, mostly paperwork and traffic stops, but occasionally something wild, like the time he'd chased a purse snatcher through a crowded Times Square. Elliot shared bits of their life too. The art they loved but never finished, the small-town upbringing they'd fled, the way they'd come out as non-binary at 25 and never looked back. Noah listened, really listened, his questions gentle but curious, like he wanted to know every piece of them. By 4 a.m., the rain had slowed to a drizzle, and Elliot's eyelids were heavy. Noah noticed, grabbing a blanket from the armrest. "Couch is yours," he said. "I'll take the chair." Elliot wanted to protest, to say they'd be fine heading home, but the warmth of the apartment and Noah's steady presence made them stay. As they drifted off, the last thing they saw was Noah's silhouette against the window, the city lights framing him like a painting they'd never forget. Elliot woke to the smell of bacon and the soft clatter of dishes. Sunlight streamed through Noah's window, catching dust motes in the air. They sat up, the blanket slipping off, and realized they were still in Noah's flannel shirt, the sleeves bunched at their wrists. For a moment, they felt like they belonged here, in this stranger's apartment, which was both thrilling and terrifying. "Morning," Noah called from the tiny kitchen, flipping something in a pan. He was in a gray t-shirt now, his hair mussed from sleep. "Hope you like eggs. It's the one thing I can cook without burning the place down." Elliot laughed, rubbing their eyes. "Eggs sound perfect. You didn't have to do this, you know?" Noah shrugged, sliding a plate across the counter. "Figured you'd need fuel before you trek back to Bushwick. Coffee's brewing too." They ate at the small table, the silence comfortable but charged, like the air before a storm. Elliot noticed the way Noah's hands moved. Steady, deliberate, like he was used to keeping things under control. They wondered what it would be like to know someone like that, someone who could anchor you when life felt like a runaway train. "So," Noah said, leaning back in his chair, "what's your deal, Elliot? You said you're an artist. Got anything I can see?" Elliot hesitated. Their portfolio was a mess of half-finished ideas, but Noah's curiosity felt genuine, not judgmental. They pulled out their phone, now at 10% thanks to Noah's charger, and scrolled to a digital sketch of a cityscape, vibrant, chaotic, with colors bleeding into each other like a dream. Noah leaned closer, his shoulder brushing theirs, and let out a low whistle. "That's incredible," he said. "You've got a way of making the city feel alive." Elliot's cheeks warmed. "Thanks. I haven't shown anyone that in a while." "Why not?" Noah's eyes were on them now, not the screen, and Elliot felt exposed in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. They shrugged, picking at their eggs. "Lost my job. Lost my confidence, I guess. Hard to keep going when no one's buying what you're selling." Noah nodded like he understood more than he let on. "I get it. This job, being a cop, it's not what I thought it'd be when I signed up. Half the time, I'm just pushing papers or breaking up bar fights. But you keep showing up, you know? Because sometimes you make a difference, even if it's small. Elliot wanted to ask more. What had Noah wanted to be before the badge? But a knock at the door interrupted them. Noah frowned, setting down his coffee. 1 second. It was a neighbor, an older woman with a sharp voice, asking about a noise complaint from the night before. Noah handled it with calm authority, but Elliot caught the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders stiffened. When he came back, he looked tired again, like the night's ease had been chipped away. "Everything okay?" Elliot asked. "Yeah," Noah said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just work stuff creeping in. You don't want to hear about it." "I do," Elliot said, surprising themselves. "If you want to talk." Noah looked at them, really looked, and for a moment, Elliot thought he might open up. But then he shook his head, grabbing their plates. "Another time. You've got a city to conquer, right?" They left Noah's apartment an hour later, his number saved in their phone and a promise to grab coffee sometime. Elliot walked to the subway, Noah's shirt still on their back, feeling like they'd left something behind. The city felt different today, brighter, sharper, like it was daring them to take a chance. That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. They kept thinking about Noah's laugh, the way his apartment felt like a safe harbor. On impulse, they texted him, "Thanks again for last night. Coffee soon?" The reply came almost instantly, "Name the place. I'm in." They met at a cafe in the East Village, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. Noah was already there, in a leather jacket and jeans, looking like he'd stepped out of a movie. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Elliot's art, Noah's childhood in Brooklyn, the way the city could break you and build you back up. By the time they parted ways, Elliot felt a spark they hadn't felt in years, a dangerous, hopeful thing that made their heart race. But life wasn't a movie, and Elliot's reality came crashing back. A call from their landlord reminded them rent was overdue, and their job applications were going nowhere. They started avoiding Noah's texts, not because they didn't want to see him, but because they were afraid of what it meant to want someone when their life was a mess. Noah, though, wasn't one to give up easily. He showed up at the cafe one evening, catching Elliot sketching in a corner. "You ghosting me?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from them. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. Elliot's throat tightened. "I'm just not in a great place right now." Noah leaned forward, his voice low. "You don't have to be. I like you, Elliot. Mess and all." Elliot stared at Noah, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. The cafe buzzed around them. Clinking cups, murmured conversations, but all Elliot could hear was their own heartbeat. Noah's confession was raw, unguarded, and it cracked something open in Elliot they'd kept locked for years. "I like you too," Elliot admitted, their voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm a disaster right now. You don't want to get tangled up in this." Noah's smile was soft, almost sad. "I'm a cop, Elliot. I'm used to tangles. Let me decide what I want." They started seeing each other more. Coffee dates, late-night walks through Central Park, a rainy afternoon at the Met where Noah teased Elliot about their artsy interpretations of abstract paintings. Each moment felt like a stolen breath, a pause in the chaos of Elliot's life. Noah was steady, a constant in a way Elliot hadn't known they needed. But the closer they got, the more Elliot's fears crept in. What if Noah saw the real them, the anxious, unemployed artist who could barely keep their life together? What if he got tired of waiting for them to figure it out? Meanwhile, Noah had his own battles. He didn't talk much about work, but Elliot noticed the way he'd go quiet after a long shift, the way his hands clenched when his phone buzzed with a work email. One night, over pizza in Noah's apartment, he let slip that he'd been involved in a high-profile case. A shooting in the Bronx that had left the precinct under scrutiny. The media was circling, and Noah was caught in the middle, his testimony scheduled for a hearing that could make or break his career. "It's not just about me," Noah said, staring at the beer in his hand. "It's the kid who got caught in the crossfire. I keep thinking if I'd been faster, maybe." Elliot reached for his hand, their fingers brushing. "You can't carry that alone, Noah." He looked at them, his eyes searching. "I don't want to. Not with you." That night, they kissed for the first time. A slow, tentative thing that felt like falling and flying all at once. Noah's hands were gentle, cupping Elliot's face like they were something precious. Elliot felt the world shift, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. But even as they melted into each other, a voice in Elliot's head whispered, "This can't last. You'll ruin it." The next week, Elliot landed a freelance gig designing posters for a local theater. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline, a chance to prove they could still create something worthwhile. They threw themselves into it, staying up late sketching, fueled by coffee and the memory of Noah's kiss. But the pressure was relentless, and when Noah invited them to a precinct fundraiser, Elliot froze. Meeting his colleagues meant stepping into his world, a world of badges and expectations, where Elliot's messy life might not fit. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Elliot said, avoiding Noah's eyes as they sat on his couch. Noah's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "You don't have to be ready for everything. Just show up. For me." Elliot wanted to. God, they wanted to. But the thought of standing in a room full of cops, of being judged or misgendered or just seen in all their uncertainty, was too much. They shook their head, and Noah didn't push, but the silence between them felt heavier than ever. Days later, Elliot's freelance client rejected their first draft, calling it too chaotic. The criticism stung, echoing every doubt they'd ever had. They stopped answering Noah's texts again, retreating to their tiny apartment, where the walls felt like they were closing in. They sketched obsessively, trying to drown out the noise in their head, but every line felt wrong, every idea incomplete. Then came the night Noah showed up at their door, rain-soaked and furious. "You can't keep doing this, Elliot," he said, his voice raw. "You can't just disappear every time it gets hard." "I'm trying," Elliot snapped, their own anger flaring. "You don't get it, Noah. I'm not like you. I don't have my shit together. I'm not enough." Noah stepped closer, his eyes blazing. "You're enough for me. Why can't you see that?" Elliot stood frozen, Noah's words cutting deeper than they'd expected. The rain dripped from his jacket, pooling on their apartment floor, but all Elliot could focus on was the way his eyes held both anger and something softer, something that looked like love. They wanted to believe him, but the weight of their own insecurities was crushing. "I'm scared," Elliot admitted, their voice breaking. "I'm scared I'll let you down, that I'll always be this mess." Noah's expression softened, and he closed the distance between them, his hands resting gently on Elliot's shoulders. "You're not a mess. You're human, and I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to let me in." They stood there, the air thick with unspoken promises, until Elliot nodded, tears stinging their eyes. Noah pulled them into a hug, his arms strong and steady, and for the first time in weeks, Elliot felt like they could breathe. They started over slowly. Noah came to Elliot's apartment with takeout, sitting cross-legged on the floor as they showed him their revised sketches. Elliot went to one of Noah's precinct events, gripping his hand tightly as they navigated a room full of strangers. It wasn't perfect, Elliot still flinched when someone used the wrong pronouns, and Noah still carried the weight of his case. But they were trying, together. One night, as they lay on Noah's couch, Elliot's head on his chest, Noah spoke quietly. "The hearing's tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm glad you're here." Elliot tilted their head to look at him. "You're going to be okay. You're the strongest person I know." Noah's laugh was soft, almost disbelieving. "You make me want to be." The hearing was a media circus, with reporters camped outside the courthouse and Noah's name splashed across local news. Elliot watched from their apartment, heart pounding as they read updates online. Noah had testified about the shooting, his voice steady but heavy, recounting the night a stray bullet had hit a teenager. The articles praised his honesty, but the comments tore him apart, calling him everything from a hero to a traitor. Elliot wanted to be there, to hold his hand, but Noah had asked them to stay away, saying the chaos would be too much. When Noah showed up at their door that night, he looked drained, his eyes shadowed. "It's over," he said, stepping inside. "No charges, but the kid's still gone. Nothing changes that." Elliot didn't know what to say, so they just held him, their arms tight around his trembling frame. They stayed like that for a long time, the city humming outside, a reminder that life went on even when it felt like it shouldn't. In the weeks that followed, Elliot found their rhythm again. They landed another freelance gig, this one for a queer-owned bookstore, and the work felt meaningful, like a step toward something real. Noah started opening up more, sharing the parts of himself he'd kept hidden, the dreams he'd had of being a teacher, the guilt he carried from every call that went wrong. They were building something not perfect but honest, and it felt like enough. Then came the night that changed everything. Elliot was at Noah's, sketching while he cooked, when his phone rang. It was his partner at the precinct, her voice sharp through the speaker. "Noah, you need to get down here. Now." Noah's face went pale. "What's going on?" "It's a standoff. Guy's got a gun. Says he'll only talk to you." Elliot's stomach dropped. They watched Noah grab his jacket, his badge, his gun, moving with a focus that scared them. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm. "I'll be back." "Noah," Elliot started, but he was already out the door. They waited, pacing the apartment, the TV on mute as news channels speculated about a hostage situation in Harlem. Every minute felt like an hour, every siren outside a knife to their heart. They wanted to call, to text, but they knew Noah needed to focus. So they waited, sketching his face from memory, praying he'd come back. The clock ticked past midnight, each second stretching into eternity. Elliot sat on Noah's couch, their sketchbook open but untouched, the pencil trembling in their hand. The TV flickered with grainy footage of police lights and barricades, but no word on Noah. They texted him once, a simple "be safe," but there was no reply. The silence was worse than any answer. At 2:17 a.m., the door opened. Noah stood there, soaked from the rain, his face drawn but alive. Elliot launched themselves at him, wrapping their arms around him so tightly it hurt. "You're okay," they whispered, half sobbing. "You're okay." Noah held them back, his breath ragged. "Yeah," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm okay." They didn't let go for a long time, standing in the doorway as the rain pounded outside. Noah finally pulled back, his hands framing Elliot's face. "It was bad," he said. "Guy was lost, angry, but we got him to put the gun down. No one got hurt." Elliot searched his eyes, seeing the weight he carried, the relief and the guilt intertwined. "You did good," they said, meaning it. "You always do." Noah shook his head, a faint smile breaking through. "Not always. But you make me want to try. They spent the night talking, curled up on the couch, Noah's head on Elliot's shoulder. He told them about the standoff, how the man had been grieving, how Noah had talked him down by sharing his own pain, his own losses. Elliot listened, their heart aching for him, for the way he gave so much of himself to a city that didn't always give back. In the weeks that followed, they grew closer, their lives weaving together in ways Elliot hadn't dared hope for. They moved some of their art supplies to Noah's apartment, leaving sketches on his fridge, bursts of color against the gray of his world. Noah started taking classes at night, working toward a teaching degree, his eyes lighting up when he talked about it. Elliot's freelance work picked up, their designs gracing bookstore windows and community flyers, each one a step toward rebuilding their confidence. One evening, as they walked through Brooklyn, the city alive with spring, Noah stopped under a streetlight. "Elliot," he said, his voice steady but nervous. "I don't know what's next for us, but I know I want you in it. All of it." Elliot's heart raced, but for once, it wasn't from fear. They took his hand, their fingers intertwining. "I'm in," they said, and meant it. The road ahead wasn't easy. There were still late nights when Noah came home quiet, still days when Elliot doubted their worth. But they faced it together, building a life that was messy and beautiful and theirs. The city, with all its chaos and noise, became their canvas. A place where two people, lost in their own ways, found each other on a rainy night when the last train didn't come. And as they stood together, watching the skyline from Noah's window, Elliot realized something. They hadn't just missed a train that night. They'd caught something better, a chance at love, at hope, at a future they could both believe in.